Hello and welcome to this special interview. The Kingdom of Bahrain demonstrates a very strong dedication to promoting and implementing sustainable human development strategies and programs as part of its ambitious visions and firm commitment to international norms and to the United Nations principles. To talk more about that, we are pleased to be joined here by the President of the 77th United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Ksaba Qureshi, who is currently visiting the Kingdom. Thank you for being with us today.
Sarah, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Mr. President, first of Your Excellency, I would like to thank you for giving us this interview. And I know it's very short notice, especially that you're here in the Kingdom now just shortly. Can you tell us about the areas of focus that you are here for in the visit to your Kingdom?
In one expression, crisis management. The world is in crisis. It's the most complex, most difficult crisis the world is going through for the last 70 years. And Bahrain is one of the most constructive actors in the United Nations General Assembly. So the purpose of my visit here, to find alliances, to find cooperations with the government and with the King of His Majesty, the King of Bahrain, to seek where we can help member states to weather the current crisis, where we can help member states to progress on the sustainability transformation and to get prepared for the challenges that are waiting further down on the road. My other purpose for coming here was to see by my eyes what I saw from the books and different reports, that it is possible, even in a small country where various diverse communities, be them religious or ethnic communities, can live, work and thrive together. I saw very nice examples. I wish many leaders could be given the same tour I had the chance to participate yesterday. And last but not least, I wanted to meet young Bahraini diplomats, the future leaders, to discuss with them how they feel this world, how are they getting prepared for this world, and how their knowledge is being up to date for the challenges of the tomorrow. And last but not least, with your foreign minister and with His Majesty the King, we discussed matters of regional security.
Yes. Actually, that brings us to our next questions. There's a lot of coordination, cooperation between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Nations specifically. How do you value this kind of cooperation and coordination between the Kingdom and the different agencies at the United Nations throughout history, of course?
The United Nations consists of 193 countries. Smaller, bigger ones, medium-sized ones. Bahrain belongs to the relatively small countries, but belongs to those relatively small countries who have large influence. Because of their diplomacy and because of their approach, how to handle certain issues, how to handle certain crises. It is one of the reasons Bahrain is a regional hub for the United Nations. More than 20 agencies, UN agencies, have local representations here, and they are dealing not only with questions directly related to Bahrain, but to the broader region. Yeah. Bahrain is also an important member, playing roles from time to time on different platforms of the United Nations. Not long ago, Bahrain was a member of the Security Council. Together with 14 other countries in the world, had a prime responsibility of where the world goes in terms of war and peace. Bahrain also was member of the Human Rights Council, a very important organ when we design the future social stability and legal stability in our countries. And last but not least, Bahrain is a very generous country, generously supporting humanitarian efforts, and all, as I was told by His Majesty the King, all the activities, humanitarian activities of Bahrain that are conducted abroad are done with the cooperation and via the United Nations agencies. So Bahrain is a valued and very highly cherished partner of the United Nations.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, everything that you just mentioned would not have been possible without the great efforts and support, the royal support to the agencies and to these initiatives. How important is it to know that there is this royal support from the government and from the leaders to all of the initiatives and the agencies on the ground?
Sarah, all countries, all communities need vision, particularly in time of crisis. All times of crisis put a very heavy burden on each and every nation, smaller and bigger, more wealthy or less wealthy. Those countries who can embrace a vision for themselves, for their development, for their place in the larger, broader world, those countries are used to be the most successful ones. I think Bahrain is a lucky country because first and foremost, what I saw the vision Bahrain is a very well thought strategy for the future. And when I had the chance to have a discussion with His Majesty, I felt that he is a man with vision. So it's always very reassuring that even in time of wars, in time of financial crisis, in time of climate crisis, there are leaders in the world who take the responsibility.
Absolutely. The vision for the future is a very important thing, and the Kingdom of Bahrain is actually one of the first countries to launch a national charter to align its national development goals with the sustainable development goals set by the United Nations General Assembly as an internationally recognized benchmark for developmental progress and excellence. How do you value this kind of commitment to these outcomes?
Sarah, let me respond in a very personal manner.
Yes.
I was the co-chair of the United Nations negotiations many years ago that produced the Sustainable Development Goals. When I gathered down the results of the long negotiations that produced the 17 goals, I was very hopeful because we felt that it is something serious for the whole humanity, for the future. But I had still some doubts. How will it come down to different countries, to schools, municipalities, companies, even universities and scientific institutions? And I was very positively surprised in the last couple of years, and I'm absolutely positively surprised when I see that in Bahrain you are one of those countries, one of the first countries who even have a ministry for sustainable development. But having an administrative unit is, of course, indicating your willingness. But when you look into the figures, how the budget is broken down, how money is allocated, how policies are aligned, along with a sustainability transformation, that is very reassuring. What is usually the deficiency in the world? We created a global vision, which answers the question where and how we would like to see this world and ourselves in this world by 2030. This is a vision of transformation, but it's a global vision, not a national one. No one can implement a global vision. It needs to be translated into national realities. So Bahrain has done her job. Bahrain obviously made her priorities, distilled the 17 goals for your realities, your needs, your priorities, according to your traditions, your social structure, and you started creating a mechanism how you put together and turn it into a national development program. I wish you could explain it to many other countries because those who could internalize it, who could make it their own, who could make it a kind of national program and finance it, those countries are today the most successful ones. Those who are a little bit more waiting, expecting something, seeing time is flying by, those countries are starting having major trouble because the world is moving. Changes are happening with us or without us. The big question, we would like to be masters of the change, or we would like to be victims of the change. Victims of the climate crisis, water crisis, food crisis, energy crisis. Those countries that have the knowledge, have the ability, and have the capability, institutional capability of responding to this situation and going ahead, those countries will be the most successful ones.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, when you talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, as you've said, this is a global initiative, but it has to be done on a national scale, basically. And the Kingdom of Bahrain has taken each one of these goals and done something in this goal. So for instance, when we talk about women empowerment, gender equality, when we talk about education, supporting the youth, a lot of things have been done. One of these initiatives, or two of these initiatives, is the King Hamad Youth Empowerment Award to achieve the SDGs and the Princess Sabika bint Ibrahim Al Khalifa Global Award for Women's Empowerment. They are considered among Bahrain's leading and most creative initiatives that aim at achieving various goals, really. How do you value these kind of initiatives and the results that they basically show?
We discussed these two awards with His Majesty and with your Foreign Minister. And I sincerely hope that these awards could be turned into some kind of international awards under UN umbrella. And if there is an intention on the side of the government of Bahrain to approach the United Nations and a part of the slight cooperation, what you have already with UNDP, the development agency of the United Nations, to make it a kind of UN-affiliated award, I'll be very happy to lend my support to this endeavor. I think both the youth and the empowerment of women are strategically important for all societies. If we want to make success in the future, first and foremost, we have to make sure that 100% of the societies, each and every member, should be given a chance to develop his or her full capacities. We cannot afford to leave behind half of the population. The second, whatever we try to achieve in terms of transformation will be determining the fate not only this generation, but even more the generations to come. So it's about our children and our grandchildren. If we want them to be on board, we have to involve them. We have to make sure they understand what we are talking about, they understand the consequences, and in my perception, we have to make kind of social contract. Social contract between generations. If there's a good understanding, what are the challenges today? What is awaiting us further down on the road? And what we'll be doing right now and what is going to be done a little bit later, what will be the consequences of our actions or inactions for the next generations, there should be a good understanding among generations. Yes. These two awards are excellent in this term as well.
Yes. When we look at the challenges that are facing the world, we look at the SDGs as an answer to them. But in reality, the challenges look differently in each and every different country. So, but they are the same, initially the same challenges. How do you go among spreading the awareness as the United Nations in order for governments to work on facing these kind of problems?
As I mentioned, while we have a global vision, while we have global goals, we have even global rules. We may agree even more some global, some agreements of global significance. Each and every nation has their own domestic realities. The challenges are very different. The challenges of today's Bahrain are very different to be compared with the challenges of Chad. They are also very different from challenges of Canada or Russia because of the difference in the social structure, different of the natural environment, different of the level of development, different of the human development index, and many other factors. So while we agree where we jointly want to march, we have to understand and translate it into our national realities. We cannot expect that everybody is doing exactly the same in each and every country. That would not be realistic, and that would not be even very wise to advise. So when we have the vision, global vision, we need to have national visions and regional visions, and maybe sometimes local visions as well, because the big plans must be translated into local realities. When it comes to local level, it becomes very clear it's about us, it's about people, it's about the local communities.
Right. Motivation is something that I want to talk to you about. Motivation and having role models and international recognition. The president of the 61st UN General Assembly, the UNGA session, Sheikha Haya bint Rashid Al Khalifa from Bahrain, was the third woman to ever hold this position. What does this tell the world about the progress made by women in the Kingdom of Bahrain?
Let me start that this morning my first 3 meetings were with women leaders. It's very seldom happens to me when I come to a country and meet the top leaders of the country. The first very important 3 meetings are with ladies, and ladies with very powerful portfolios. For example, Minister for Sustainable Development, or the Secretary General for the Council of Women, National Council of Women, or the Executive Director of the Diplomatic Academy. In her hands, the future of diplomacy in this country. So it's quite obvious when you look into the data of Bahrain, the human development index is very high. Within the social structure, the education of the girls and women is at least on that level as the men. In the government sector, you have a majority of ladies working. So in terms of legal regulations, I think you have done what you had to. Now the implementation is going on. But coming back to Sheikha Haya, she was the 3rd president of the General Assembly. Unfortunately, until today, we had only 4 out of 77. I'm the 77th president of the General Assembly. She was a very successful president of the General Assembly. Particularly when you have a time of crisis, it turned out that women's leadership is transformative, more transformative in most cases than men's leadership. Women in many cases approach crisis situations with a more empathetic manner. They are somehow more sensitive to finding more complex solutions than men. And I don't want to undergraduate the man leadership, but the last September, during the high-level week in the General Assembly, I convened a meeting of the women leaders, heads of state and government, with the question that let's discuss together from female perspective, how do you approach a crisis situation, and how is it different from your peers who happen to be men, prime ministers or president? I can tell you it was one of the most interesting discussions throughout the whole high-level week I participated. And I hope this platform can be done a permanent one, because the member states will benefit from it.
Yes, absolutely. Using the strengths of both genders in tackling these kind of issues. That's an amazing way of doing it. How does the general meeting of the Council of the Presidents of the UN General Assembly, the UNCPGA, held in Bahrain last March, add to the continuous partnership between the Kingdom and the United Nations?
Let us tell the viewers that this council consists of the previous presidents of the General Assembly of the United Nations. The president of the General Assembly in the United Nations is in protocol order, the #1 person of the United Nations. So we are talking about senior persons, persons with experience, persons who went to battle, persons who had to feel the taste of the challenge, and sometimes they maybe had the taste of the victory. These are the persons with accumulated knowledge. And I was very grateful when I heard that after this council having been reconvened, His Majesty offered his assistance and offered to make a foundation to support this council's work for the future. Why would it be important? The world is going through a multifold crisis. The United Nations is mirroring the state of affairs in the world. The United Nations is looking for solutions. When you have very complex situations, you need to find integrated solutions. It requires knowledge. It requires experience. It requires scientific evidence. What the former presidents of the General Assembly can offer is a kind of vast experience which does not exist in any other part of the United Nations. So actually, being here in Bahrain, their council started advising the negotiating process in New York that is about to reform the General Assembly itself. Very soon you will see a resolution coming out from the General Assembly which took on many advices that came from the Council of the former presidents. So I'm particularly grateful for His Majesty, because via this council he's helping to reform the United Nations.
That's amazing and very inspiring also. Your Excellency, before we end today's interview, I want to talk a little bit about you yourself. Now, during my research into you and getting this into this position now, you talked a lot about now is the time for implementation. You also mentioned that the United Nations needs to start, or is honoring their commitments and needs to continue to honor its commitments in the countries of the United Nations as well as the countries around it, or in international relations. You also really emphasize the importance of multiculturalism as well as multilingualism. What is your presidency comes at a time when the world can say it has recovered from COVID-19 pandemic. What are your presidency's key priorities? What are the opportunities that you seek to build and the challenges that you face in the presidency?
The motto of my presidency is solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science. It is a kind of abbreviation of the priorities of my presidency. Why solutions? Because we have quite many goals, we have many agreements, we have many legal accords, but we are much weaker in the implementation of goals, achieving those goals and implementing our taken obligations. So it's time to deliver. It is crisis time, and crisis can only be overcome if we go for action. Through solidarity, sustainability, and science. Solidarity. Unfortunately, differences and inequalities in the world has been growing for many years. As we speak, the speed is growing. So the differences among countries and between countries, the inequalities among countries and within countries are growing. What we know for sure, this cannot last forever. It would create a world that would be absolutely polarized, that would be absolutely unjust and impossible to govern. Therefore, in my understanding, solidarity now is more important than ever. If more than 1 billion people still are at the level of having not enough food for sustaining themselves, it's a tragic situation. Humanity cannot afford that. If there are still more than 200 million people who are fleeing from conflicts, they are trying to find their place under the sun. If there are more than 2 billion people in the world who have no access to safe drinking water on their daily lives, if a very significant part of the children in developing countries falling out of the school much earlier than they would like to have to, if in many countries we are losing still way too many children before the age of 5, these inequalities cannot be sustained. We should change it. So solutions through solidarity, sustainability and science. Sustainability means that we have to make a transformation. The way how we conduct business, how we conduct our actions in the world is creating today more problems than what we solve. Those problems, we call them climate crisis, water crisis, loss of biodiversity, depletion of ocean, acidification of ocean, depletion of soil and deforestation. These are the issues that will determine our future chances for life on Earth. We cannot run the economies much longer that actually is done on the expense of our children. So we have to make a sustainable transformation. That's the 17 sustainable development goals has been created for. And science. First and foremost, because when you seek integrated solutions for very complex challenges, what is the best way to find the ground? It is the scientific evidence. Because if you want to address at the same time climate issues, water issues, food issues, energy production, poverty eradication and health issues, these are very closely interlinked questions, and if you want to be efficient, you have to make an integrated answer. The second is political. The world is very strongly divided today. The geopolitical divide probably is going to grow, is going to deepen in the years to come. If we want to find solutions for our major crises in the time of deepening geopolitical divide, then obviously there will be no common ground on ideological basis. It would also be very difficult to find common ground on the basis of geopolitics or even politics. So if we really need to cooperate, but we have to cooperate because otherwise everything is crumbling down, so we have to come together, that common ground should be found and broadened. And in my understanding, that common ground could be based on scientific evidence. That is the same in Saudi Arabia, same in Bahrain, same in the United Nations, and the United States and China, or any other country. Of course, once we have this common ground, there will be political bargaining. Maybe there will be very difficult deals, but at least the point of departure will be shared by most of the countries. So if we take it all together, you may call it a program of transformation. You may also call it a program for much more than 1 year, and I agree. And I'm not naive to accomplish everything until the end of my presidency. But as far as I see the reaction of the member states, including that of Bahrain, those who have responsibility for the future, many of these points resonate with the governments. And I'm very grateful for those governments who try to act responsibly and act in the name of humanity.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for answering our questions and for enlightening us on all of these issues and topics, especially your foresight for your presidency and how it's going to go on. Thank you for being with us today.
Sarah, thank you very much for having me. It has been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much. And we'd like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us and watching this episode of Special Interview.